Okay, welcome to QFT. QFT stands for Question Formulation Technique, and it's a procedure that is used to get students to start coming up with their own questions. This is a very easy, intuitive thing for young children to do. If you've been around a 4-year-old, you know how good they are at coming up with questions. But that process slows down and stops for a lot of our students as they get into middle school and high school, and it can be really difficult to elicit good questions from them, where they're creatively thinking, where they're being curious, where they're engaging with the content in a higher way than just trying to absorb it as quickly as they can. So the question formulation technique is a series of steps that teachers can do that allow students the space to come up with their own questions that then can be used for a variety of different things. So our agenda for today, I'm going to give you a little overview of where I work. I'm going to explain the QFT process. We're going to do a practice round, talk about why you would want to do this in your classroom. I'll share some examples, and then you'll have a little bit of time to implement and think about what it would look like for you. I hope by the end you have learned about the QFT well enough that you could explain it to someone or use it, and that you'll have developed a prompt that you could implement in the next week. You don't have to, but you could, is the point. And then also that you'll have some time to explore a tool for implementing QFT through distance learning. This is, it's done well in class, but you can also do it equally well online. So it's kind of nice to have something that works well in both formats. Okay, so I work at the NASA IV&V ERC in Fairmont, West Virginia. The IV&V stands for Independent Verification and Validation. It is not 4 and 5. And what that basically means is that our office vets all of the software that goes on any NASA mission to make sure it is the right tool for the job and the tool is built correctly. So it's all about safety and mission assurance and making sure that all of that code in these incredibly complicated machines is functioning to the point where it's going to work in these really high stakes situations. I'm part of the Educator Resource Center there. Every NASA facility and center has an ERC that does educational outreach. We do fantastic summer camps. We have internships. We run our state's robotics tournaments. And a big part of our work that I'm involved in is the equipment loan program. We have $1 million worth of equipment that we train teachers in the state of West Virginia on and then loan out for free to them throughout the state. This ranges from a kit about dinosaurs to a kit of robots that you can borrow and use in your classroom. That program is on hiatus right now while we're not allowed in our building, but hopefully we're going to get it up and running as quickly as we can. And in the meantime, we've pivoted and we're all really developing online webinars and things like that that can allow teachers to implement some cool science ideas in their classrooms. My basis is as a science educator. I started out as a special education teacher and then transitioned to teaching science. I was in the classroom for 8 years in total. And so my focus sort of through this is going to be towards a science lens, but this is definitely something that's content neutral, and I'll talk about other things as well. I just think it's really exciting for science personally. This is our fantastic team. They are all incredible people to work with, from our bosses to our AmeriCorps volunteers. We are all just really pulling our weight and trying to make the best content that we can for educators in West Virginia and beyond. Okay. So getting into the QFT, there are just 4 rules, and every time you do a QFT with your students, you just remind them of these rules. The first time you might go over it a little bit more in depth and ask them to think about why we have these rules in place. But we all know that classrooms function better when there are procedures, and so this is the procedures for doing QFT. The students have about 3 minutes to ask as many questions as they can. They're usually in small groups of 3 to 4 students, but you can also have them do this independently, which is probably what would happen in a distance learning situation. If you are in person and have them in groups, one person is going to act as a scribe. And in addition to asking questions, they'll be writing down the questions of the group. The hardest one, in my experience, is do not stop to discuss, judge, or answer the questions. Our students are really good at all 3 of those things. And those things are often easier for them than generating questions. So number 2 is going to be the one that I know I have seen the most students struggle with. The scribe's job is to write down every question exactly as it is stated and to change any statement into a question. So if someone in the group just makes a statement, it's the job of the group to reframe that into a question. You can do this in younger grades too. If your students are not able to write for themselves, you can do this as a whole group activity and have the teacher acting as scribe. It's more chaotic, but it's also super fun, right? So this is, I hope you learn those rules because we're going to do this now. Get out your sheet of scrap paper or open up another window on your computer where you can type. My focus statement for you, which they call a Q focus, it sounds a little goofy to me, but I'm going with it, is that good professional development includes the same elements. Okay, so that's what my prompt that I'm giving you to generate questions on. So remember, you're supposed to ask as many questions as you can. Don't stop to judge, discuss, or answer the questions. Write down every question exactly as you think it, and then change any statement into a question. Okay, so I'm going to start the timer for 3 minutes. You have 3 minutes to generate as many questions as you can. Whenever I get around to starting the timer, that's when your 3 minutes will start. All right, that's it. From the participant point of view, in my opinion, this is the hardest step. So congratulate yourselves, you got through the tough part. Okay. Now that you have a list of questions in front of you, your next job is to number all of your questions and to label them as either open or closed. So closed questions are ones that are like yes, no questions, or that could be answered with 1 or 2 words. Open-ended questions would require an explanation. So just go through and label those and number them. And on this slide, I put up a copy of one that I did as part of a professional development, just to show you this is messy and it does not have to look good. This is not a polished product. This is brainstorming. Do not feel self-conscious about whatever it is you put on the paper. I personally don't love seeing my handwriting up there and seeing like how difficult it was for me to number my questions, I guess, when I was doing this. But I want to share it with you because when we're asking students to come up with their own questions, we're asking them to be vulnerable in ways that they may not be comfortable with. And so to really create that invitation to open up and to share their ideas, which they're definitely judging and they are surely thinking that their peers are judging, we need to be open with them too and show them that this is a place where we can all have flaws be on display because we are not perfect people, and this is just something we're doing today and it's not a big deal. Okay, so that's the step that you would take students through. Once they generate questions around the Q focus, they would go through and number them and label them as open or closed. It's also important to note that there's not, like, students want to think that like open questions are good questions and closed questions are bad questions, and that's not really true. You want to kind of put that thinking aside. Some questions are good in some contexts and they're bad in others. All of the questions that we came up with could probably drive our learning forward or our understanding, depending on how they're used and in what context. Okay, so open, that's not code for good or bad, I guess is my point there. The next step is to strategize. Actually, I skipped a step and I should put it in here. I'm going to edit this slide right now. So typically the next thing that's done is to ask the small groups to pick an open question and change it into a closed question, and then to pick a closed question and change it into an open question. So go through, take a couple minutes to identify a couple of your questions and rewrite them as the opposite format. Okay, so hopefully you've at least had some time to play around with that process and get a feel for what it's like. Usually that would be done in small groups, so students have each other to bounce ideas off of and help with, but it's not always a trivial task to do. Okay, so the next step is to prioritize your questions, to identify typically 3 that are the ones that you want to pursue, and that would again usually be done in a group. It could be done individually. And then you create an action plan or a research plan or your next steps for finding the answer to those questions and share them out. So we are going to share our top 3 questions using a Google form. I'm going to pop the link in the chat, but if you don't want to try to figure out where the chat is, you go to bit.ly/capital ERC. Those 3 letters have to be capitalized. QFT and then capital F for form. So let me get you the link. And that's the long, gross version in the chat for you. So what I want you to do is identify 3 of your questions and then share them with us in that Google form. It'll ask you for your first question, your second, and your third, and then we'll look at them, okay? Because I want to model what it looks like to go through student questions. So I'll give you a few minutes to pick out your favorite questions and get them typed in, and I'll pull up the document. You absolutely can use the QFT to start a topic in science. As a teacher, I think the hardest part is coming up with those good Q focus things to get started. And so at the end, like later on, once we go through this process once, I'm going to share some resources for finding good ones and developing your own. So you'll have one that you can start a topic with in science. It does not have to be a statement. It could be a picture, it could be a video, it could be a demonstration that you do. So it really just depends on what your goal is and the kinds of questions you want students to ask. I think it's particularly good in science because we're so focused on our content sometimes in science and communicating to students the big concepts and ideas that we need them to know, that we miss that idea of what science really is, that science is not known, it's not in a textbook, it's what's being discovered every day. Most of the things we're teaching our students have been settled facts for a very long time. And so we don't always get a good chance to communicate that science is about asking questions and finding out new things, not just memorizing things that have gone before. So I really like it for science, and I promise we'll get there. Okay, so our first person has typed in, what elements would you need? Do all elements have to be present every time? What aspects can be personalized? Will the audience be able to figure out if the elements are present or not? Thank you. Is PD completely ineffective if all of these elements aren't present? What is the definition of good in the context of PD? What are the key elements? What if it does not have those elements? What aspects can be personalized? Oh, Kathy, let me get you that link again. Okay, let's see if this works for you. So try that again and see if that helps. Okay. How will participants benefit from this information? Can information be provided? Can the information provided be implemented immediately in the classroom? Can the information be easily explained to students? Thank you. Does it matter how you deliver the elements? How do you apply those elements to different professional development topics? What are the elements? Thank you. So what I'm modeling here is that we can't be evaluating or answering our students' questions or we ruin the process. This is, for me at least, this is the hardest part, second only to maybe coming up with a good Q focus. It's the idea that I'm not answering these questions for the student and I'm not telling them that they did a really good job if they have a question that I really like. I really like some of these questions in here. And I didn't really do a great job on the Q focus as far as I'm concerned. I don't know what the best elements for PD are. I think there's some that are in common with all of these, but I just kind of wanted to spark a discussion about professional development. And you guys are coming up with great questions. But as the facilitator of QFT, it is not my place to guide you as to which questions I think are the best or to help you answer those questions. The whole point of this process is to give agency to the people asking the questions. And as soon as I start answering and evaluating, I take that agency away. So it can be tough to bite your tongue and sit on your hands during this part, but letting your students actually sit with the questions that they came up with and make their own choices with them and make their own plan for how they're going to get them answered is an essential part of this. Okay, so thank you to all of you who participated here. These are really are fantastic questions. And that's kind of giving you a flavor of both sides of the QFT for the strategizing phase. Okay. This slide is from the Right Question Institute. QFT is based on a book by, and actually it's a few slides back, let me go back there, Dan Rothstein and Luz Santana, called Make Just One Change. It's a really short book. It's a good one. If you're in a district that does professional learning circles or something like that, this isn't a bad book to do in that kind of a setting because it is really simple and it's just, it's this one thing. It is the QFT process. Simple to explain, difficult to master, right? Just like all good teaching strategies. So they've gone on to found the Right Question Institute, which is a website. You can get a free account on there. I highly recommend it. It's got a lot of great resources and information. And so this is a slide directly from them that is just the short version of what the QFT is. So the question focus is where you start, following the rules for producing questions, improving the questions by categorizing them and changing them from closed to open and open to closed, and then strategizing and having some time to reflect or extend. Okay. So that's the process. You've been through it. Maybe you haven't decided to actually research and answer your questions or do any writing about it, but that's the basic nuts and bolts of it. So why do QFT? Before I give you my input on it, just think about it on your own and feel free to unmute yourself or to put something in the chat of what you think the benefit of this process is. Why would we spend time in our classroom, which is like our most valuable and limited commodity, on this rather than something else? Yeah, the discovering prior knowledge, when you're asking and evaluating those questions after you've brainstormed them, the students really fill in a lot of each other's gaps and background knowledge in a more efficient and powerful way than a teacher can sometimes, right? Because as they're discussing which are their best three questions, there's going to be someone in that group who has the answer to at least some of them. And they can say, well, we don't really need to do anything further with that. Maybe that's not our priority, but now we all understand the answer to that question. Absolutely. And actually, QFT got started not as something designed for students, but as something designed to help parents advocate for themselves in the school setting. The authors started out at a school that had really low attendance at parent-teacher nights. And so they did some work and tried to figure out what the problem with turnout was. And when they talked to parents, the parents said, I don't really know what questions to ask the teacher. I don't know that I would get anything out of this. So this is something that can be a really powerful strategy for any group, not necessarily just students. Yeah, absolutely. You guys have some great ideas. I love it. Yes, student led. If we can get students to come up with their own questions and then follow through with research on them, that's my favorite day. So my top three things are that students move from passive to active, and it gets really lively. Like students who normally would not be engaged in a class sometimes will really shine here, where they get to ask questions and they get to have their voice be heard. It privileges those students who are willing to put themselves out there, whether or not they feel like they're smart at your subject. And so it's a good way to mix it up for some of those students. And then it creates an authentic reason for reading and research. If you have a question that you want to know the answer to, you are motivated to find the answer to that question. So it allows students to have that opportunity to ask a question that they then become passionate about and want to learn more about, which that's the best. Okay. So if you're sold on it at this point, and I hope you're at least getting towards being sold on it, it's something that doesn't take a ton of time to do in a classroom. Really, the first time, I don't even think it would take a full class period to go through one of these little cycles. It'll take longer if you're wanting to do more with it, or if you've got, a younger students that maybe need a little bit more scaffolding, but it really doesn't take a lot of time. So hopefully you're wanting to give it a try. And so the first step is to develop a Q focus. I'm not going to make you do it right now, but I just want you to be thinking about some topic that you're teaching in the next week or so, or that you want to be teaching relatively soon, that you could come up with a focus for. So just be thinking about what's going on with you, and then we'll work on it more later. The important parts of a Q focus are that it is not a question. If you're starting with a question, it's saying that your question's more important than the students, and that's not the message you want to be conveying. It should stimulate different lines of thinking. It shouldn't point everyone in the same direction. It should be simple, and then you should have a purpose for what you want to have students get out of it. Okay, and so we'll talk more about that later. An example that I just put together, which I like shamelessly stole from another teacher, the idea for was using Prezi. Prezi, if you're not familiar with it, it's like a PowerPoint style thing, except you can take a big picture and zoom into parts of it. So instead of slide after slide after slide, it's one big slide and you zoom in on your different parts of it to tell the different parts of your story. So I took an electron microscope picture of a cell and then zoomed in on different parts. And so this would be my Q focus. I would imagine using this after my students are familiar with the different parts of the cell, because, and my reason for this is, I want them to know that mitochondria are not color-coded orange the way they are in our textbook, and that it's a lot messier in real life. And so I would expect for them to come up with a lot of questions that are like, what are these different parts? Is this even a cell? Like the things that are challenging their understanding from that kind of cartoonish drawing of a cell that we have in our textbooks to something that's maybe more sophisticated in terms of understanding. And I'm not going to judge their questions for sure, but I would be sad if at least one person didn't ask why Kirby was inside this cell, because like they're going to pick weird off-topic things to ask about, and that's okay too. Sometimes there's a little Kirby inside of a cell, I guess. So that's an example of how you can have a Q focus that isn't text-based. You can have one that's an image. For math, I think that QFT can be really good because for those same reasons I was saying before, we have a lot of students who think they're not good at math, but maybe they're good at asking questions about math because they're used to being confused in math class. And so this is a time for them to shine. I would think that an error analysis type problem would be a good Q focus. Excuse me. And then videos are good too. Discrepant events are really fun, I would think, to use as a Q focus. So like, for example, this one here, we'll watch for just a second. Okay, so that was like 10 seconds, but something unexpected happened, and I would expect students to be able to generate a lot of questions about that. I would maybe use that in a unit where we're talking about different properties of matter, and get them to kind of think about things that maybe they wouldn't have otherwise. Okay, here's some more implementation examples. Alyssa Park is the teacher I shamelessly stole the Prezi idea from. She did a very similar thing. She teaches, I believe, 3rd or 4th grade with a Works Project Association. That's what WA stands for. As the Q focus and zoomed into different parts of it. And she used this with her students online. This was a digital version. And she used it to get them to ask questions that they then would research for their final project, which was either a pamphlet or a piece of historical fiction. So she made the really good argument that a lot of times when we're teaching students to do 5-paragraph essays, they don't know what their question or what their paragraph topics are going to be, or they pick paragraph topics that aren't very interesting. So on days 1 through 3, she spent time getting the students to ask and improve their questions, to share them with each other. Day 4, they gathered information, which they might not have done if they were in class, because a lot of that in-class gathering of information happens from students sharing background information with each other, things that they already know. So they spent a little more time maybe on research than they would have in a classroom. And then day 5 was prioritizing the questions. So they'd all shared their questions at that point, and each student was able to pick out 3 questions that they thought were the most important out of the whole groups. So it's a way to increase the quality of students' writing if you're sort of engaging in this process all the way through. In middle school science, I did this to introduce a unit on DNA. And so I just started with the really simple Q focus. DNA contains directions for making proteins. I don't know that that was a great Q focus, but my students came up with some great questions for it, which I was really happy about. And I never did this like as a regular thing in my classroom. It wasn't something we would do like every unit or every month. But I made sure to do it a few times at the beginning of the year because I wanted my students to understand that this was a place where we ask questions. I wanted it to be a normal part of our classroom to ask questions, because as a science teacher, I want them thinking scientifically, and that means asking questions. So this procedure was a way to normalize the question asking process in our class. Okay, and then here's a high school physics example that we're just going to watch a little bit of to give you an idea of what it looks like in
I'm going to remind you of the 4 rules for producing questions. The first one, I'm about to give you a prompt. I request that you take the time to ask as many questions as you can. Number 1. Number 2, you do not stop to discuss, judge, or answer the questions. Number 3, whoever is writing the questions, please write down every question exactly as stated. And then if there's a statement, please change it into a question. You might notice, if you walk around the neighborhood, that there are these boxes on telephone poles. Okay? I had a colleague once who thought they're batteries. They're not batteries. They're what we call transformers. And power lines from a power plant carry electricity at voltage is of about 1/3 of a million volts, about 345 volts or even more. Transformers, like the one shown there in that picture, and you'll see them all over your neighborhood, reduce the voltage to 120 volts for home use. And the Q focus is connected to what we learned, but also maybe pushing us forward a little bit. So I'd like to use some scientific language in there and to really have them be able to feel comfortable with that language.
Yeah, so the second one is why, or how does it transform the energy?
Who supplies the transformers? The power company?
Well, Optimus Prime Power. Who supplies transformers?
Like who makes them?
Who makes them?
Where do they get the electricity? How many like transformers are around like cities?
Are the transformers dangerous? Is used to make a transformer? Yeah. Yeah, to make.
It's just fun to see the banter between them, and I'll notice like students are building off each other's questions or taking questions in slightly different directions. So there's a real connection of the minds at that point between them, I think is really powerful.
I'm going to stop it there because I want to make sure that we've got time to explore what we're going to be doing later on where you're developing your own stuff. But I definitely recommend taking a peek at that. And isn't it just so fun to watch students talking to each other and be able to eavesdrop on those conversations? Another educator who uses these frequently in her classroom, Ellen Gamble, she pointed out that a lot of times the older our students are, the more quickly they get bored with procedures. And so it's okay to switch it up. Instead of having them label open and closed questions all of the time, they could label them hard or easy to answer questions. Instead of labeling what kind of question they are, they could come up with ideas of where you could research to find the answer of those questions. So don't feel like you have to stick with this exact same framework if it's not working for your students. The point is for them to be generating their own questions and taking some ownership of their learning. And so if this structure is not facilitating that, then change the structure so it works for your class. I give you permission, right? Okay, so now is the time for you to spend a little bit of time thinking about what a good Q focus would be for something you're teaching right now or something you would like to be teaching right now. This is a worksheet, and I've got a link earlier and also in the little comment box underneath to this online. This is from the Right Question Institute, but I'm not sure that it's hosted on their website right now, so it's from a third-party educator website. You start with describing what the context is, what unit you're going to be teaching and what topic within that. And then there's a lot of different reasons you could be doing the QFT. It could be something you do at the start of your unit just to get students excited and engaged. It could be something that's preparing for a longer writing assignment. And so thinking about where it occurs in your unit and your goal for the QFT are important before you start developing your Q focus. And then here, how students are going to be using their questions. So having a purpose in mind before you go into this can give you a better outcome. All right, and then once you've listed 3 to 4 ideas, they suggest that you evaluate them against here, making sure that it's not a question, making sure it can stimulate different lines of questioning, making sure it's something simple, and making sure it meets your purpose using the QFT. This is also something that it's good to get other teachers or other adults' opinions on, because sometimes they can think about something in a way that you aren't. When we're all stovepiped up in our classrooms, sometimes we're not as broad of a focus as we might need to be for something that's one of these kind of divergent teaching opportunities. Okay, so that's actually something they suggest too, is to get feedback from peers and colleagues to improve your Q focus. So remembering that it's not a question, it's stimulating different lines of questioning, it's simple and it meets your purpose, and using the QFT, take a few minutes to try to develop a Q focus, whether it's a statement, an image, a video, it is entirely up to you. And so I'm gonna give you about 5 minutes to do that. That's not very long, so I apologize for rushing you on this. But if you're feeling comfortable, please feel free to put your Q focus in the chat so that we can all kind of benefit from each other's thinking. But take at least 5 minutes to sort of get started on this process, and let me know if you have any questions or if there's anything I can do to help facilitate. You guys have been coming up with some great ones in the chat. I've been thinking a lot about the engineering design process lately, and I was watching this other professional development video, and the presenter suggested that maybe we spend too much time focusing on the build phase of engineering design projects and less thinking about the iterative process and the research that needs to happen after you build to improve your design. And so what a cool Q focus if you had groups switch designs for the same engineering design problem and have them ask questions about the other group's project and what they've done, right? So they've got their background knowledge of their device that they built. They've got this new solution to the problem in front of them. And how could that advance their thinking about how to make a better product by asking questions about this other design? So you guys are fantastic. I don't want to shut it down, but I do want to make sure you have some time to check out some of the digital tools in case you do want to implement this next week while we're still in distance-based learning mode. So on here, just remember, you guys are doing a great job. None of these have been questions, which is great. They all seem like they could stimulate a wide range of thinking. Like in the video clip that we just watched, having some little groups go off in various different directions is such a cool thing to have happen. They bounce ideas off of each other and they end up in a place that we could never anticipate. And so having that flexibility of lots of different possible questions that could come up with is really cool. So part of designing your Q focus should be to think about what are some questions that this would prompt me to think of, and thinking if those are going to be something that your students would be able to engage into is good. Okay, so here's my last slide, some links and tools to implement. The Right Question Institute has a ton of good stuff. They have a training calendar. It doesn't really have any events on it that are upcoming right now, except for paid events, but they do sometimes have free webinars, and they're really good. They usually will pull in teachers who are doing the QFT in their classrooms, so it's not just those kind of professional development experts, it's also people in the classroom who are working on things. I've pulled together this Google document of QFT resources. A lot of it overlaps with what's in the slides presentation, but if you want it in a little more succinct format, this might be a good place for you to go to. And I've started but not finished compiling some subject specific resources. Embarrassingly, science is the shortest right now, but I will get to it. So this is definitely something I will be editing. And that's a good place to look for further information. If you're not familiar with Flipgrid, I think it's probably one of the best ways to do QFT digitally. You can post your Q focus as a topic. That could be a short video, it could be an image, it could be just a phrase, and then students can reply with their own videos of the questions that they've come up with. So they would talk themselves through the process of taking some time to generate questions, doing the open and closed evaluation of them, and then picking their top 3, and then sharing them with the class. Excuse me. And then from there, they can you can give them some sort of purpose to use their questions for. Prezi we talked about, and Nearpod is another one where you can integrate things. I do want to take a moment and look at the remote learning resources on RQI because they have 2 really good ones that you might want to take a few minutes to look at. So make your own virtual QFT kits. I'm going to put this link in the chat. Okay. They have one for Padlet and one for Google Forms. And I really like the one for Google Forms. It has a way that you can build in timers for the students and it walks them through the process step by step. So if I were doing this, I could grab it and replace their Q focus with mine and be ready to go with this and send it out to students. So this is the side that I can edit. But if I was going to send this out to students, I'll show you what it looks like. Okay. I'm not worried about that error message right now. Okay. So this has 10 pages on it, which I know would make some of my students balk, but most of them are pretty short, so it's not so bad. It's got the supplies you need. It's got the rules for asking questions, and it asks them to self-evaluate which of those rules they think will be most difficult to follow and why, which is a really important part of the process, right? Okay, so their Q focus is 2 different graphs, and they want you to think about logarithmic scales while you're watching these graphs, but that you can replace with whatever your Q focus is. They've got a built-in timer here. They've got an example of what your paper should look like. And then after your timer runs out, you go on to the next step. Okay, so it walks them through the whole process. And if you've got students that are, I would say, middle school age and up, this would be a way that you could implement this with them very, very easily. I would maybe do some explanation first of why we're doing this to get some more buy-in, but it's one way that you can do this. Another good one is Padlet, which if you're not familiar with it, Padlet's kind of a collaborative digital bulletin board. You set up the board and then you can invite your students and they can all put on little boxes of text or images or things like that. So if you were doing this for QFT, this is the one for Padlet. And you can see that they've got the different boxes in here where students are sharing their most important questions. So you could set it up with the Q focus at the center, excuse me, and then have students add in their little Post-it note like things that have their questions on there. Okay, so those are 2 really good options. We've got about 10 minutes left. I don't have anything else to share, but I'm happy to stay here and answer any questions that you have, and make sure that this is a process that you are on board with. I'm going to stop recording now, so